Although Marx's theoretical project has been read in the terms of holists, compositionists, or even individualist terms, his theoretical concern with the structure and agency, with how men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please, is most coherent in the terms of a hierarchical epistemic strategy. Hierarchical epistemologies conceptualize society as a partially integrated, partially self-contradictory system. It is integrated inasmuch as all actions, relations, and institutions combine to generate and are inexorably constrained by a single overarching systemic logic. In Marxian theory, this is the logic of class, embodied in the mode of production. Within the mode of production, however, social forces are organized into mutually interdependent and antagonistic tendencies, which Contopoulos calls modules. The most important modules in Marxian theory are the opposed forces of capital and labor, whose interdependence and antagonism are generated by the logic of the mode of production. All other antagonisms are theoretically subordinate to the class struggle, so that sex-gender, for instance, is conceived of as generating its divisions within the divisions of class. Theoretically speaking, these divisions are nested within class divisions. Open a box to find inside it many smaller boxes, each of which itself contains many smaller boxes, and so on. This is a rough image of a nested modular hierarchy. Marx's theorization in terms of a modular and nested hierarchy distinguishes his analysis fundamentally both from Durkheim's functionalism and from Weber's pluralist conflict theory. In the first case, modularity means that there can be contradictions between different structures, and that these contradictions can be an intrinsic feature of the overall organization of the system. In first case, although both Marx and Durkheim employ strongly emergentist and systemic concepts, social relations constituting a mode of production, social facts constituting a social organism, their emergentisms differ fundamentally on the question of integration. For Durkheim, society forms or tends to form an organically independent whole, such that severe antagonisms which destabilize the social order are conceptualized as pathological exceptions to the systemic logic. Specifically, the conflicts between workers and owners are not radically irreconcilable within capitalism, but are the contingent pathologies of a system in transition. In Marx's analysis, on the other hand, the relationship between labor and capital cannot by any means be transformed into one of functional interdependence and complementarity. For Marx, exploitation is not some exceptional or pathological state of affairs, but a necessary, ubiquitous, and constitutive feature of capitalism. The appropriation of surplus value from workers by capitalists, from which all profit derives. Exploitation is implicit in the general formula for capital, MCM, and as such is part of the genetic code of capitalist society. distributed throughout the social body and conditioning its operation on the most fundamental level. Because of exploitation, the worker becomes poorer, the richer is his production. Exploitation turns the productive forces of workers against them, just as he turns his production into his own loss of reality and punishment, and his own product into a loss, a product that does not belong to him. So he creates the domination of the man, who does not produce over the production and the product. In the second case, although both Marx and Weber make conflict central to their sociologies, they conceptualize it in substantially opposed ways. Weber's theory assumes that conflict arises from the separateness of individuals. Their being separate and relatively autonomous units of action accounts for why individuals should compete for class, status, and power. In Marxian theory, on the other hand, it is the very connections between individuals and their integration into class relations that generates class struggle. Labor and capital do not exist separately from one another and come into conflict only through a historical process. They are not even primarily groups of people with common attributes. Rather, labor and capital are the two ends of the same relationship. Capital presupposes wage labor. Wage labor presupposes capital. They reciprocally condition the existence of each other. They reciprocally bring forth each other. Or again, wages and private property are identical. He says, the relationship of worker to his labor creates the relationship to it of the capitalist, or whatever else one wishes to call the master of the labor. Private property is thus the product, result, and necessary consequence of externalized labor, of the exterior relationship of the worker to nature and to himself. End of quote. Because certain fundamental social conflicts result not from any existential condition but precisely from the manner in which people are joined together socially, that is, class relations, and because class relations generate through their normal operation tensions that cannot be resolved without the abolition of class, capitalism as a system of relations produces the forces that move towards its own supersedure, or, as Marx and Engels put it, produces its own grave diggers. In Weber's sociology, morality is relative to subjective social action. In Durkheim's, it is relative to the objective functional needs of societies. And in Marx's, morality is relative to class. So the first implication of Marx's hierarchical conception of society is that there can be no socially absolute morality in a class society, since the good is different and opposed for labor and for capital. This class relativity is captured starkly in the title of Leon Trotsky's Their Morals and Ours. Beliefs in the present existence of a socially absolute morality, or even in a socially relative cross-class organic solidarity of the kind advocated by Durkheim, are, for Marx, mere fictions that serve the interests of capital. This is why Marx refuses ethics or morality as justifications for revolutionary struggle. He says, the theoretical conclusions of the communists are in no way based on ideas or principles that have been invented or discovered by this or that would be universal reformer. They merely express, in general terms, actual relations springing from an existing class struggle, from a historical movement going on under our very eyes. As Foucault puts it, the proletariat doesn't wage war against the ruling class because it considers such a war to be just. The proletariat makes war with the ruling class because, for the first time in history, it wants to take power, and because it will overthrow the power of the ruling class. It considers such a war to be just. End of quote. Under these conditions, genuine social solidarity, solidarity based on an accurate perception of one's real relations, can exist only within classes. So, synchronically speaking, class solidarity is the highest possible morality, as much for the capitalists as for workers. There does exist a basis for reciprocal social obligations capable of including all human beings. In a classless society, contradiction, not conflict, would be abolished, making a general human solidarity genuinely possible. For Marx, this classless society exists as a real potentiality, implicit the structure of class societies as the condition towards which they tend inexorably. The achievement of classless society would abolish alienation for capitalists as well as for workers, enabling for the first time in history the realization of a general human good. In this sense, action that works to realize the class revolution constitutes a kind of socially absolute normative value. However, it is important to stress that this is not normative in the sense of instantiating a universal moral principle located in human nature, in a Kantian a priori or in any other sense. Marx is scathing about humanistic socialists like Karl Heinzen, who believe that entire classes, which are based upon economic conditions independent of their will and are set by these conditions in a relation of mutual antagonism, can break away from their real relations by the quality of humanity, which is inherent in all men. Throughout his work, and prominently in the Manifesto, he attacks utopian socialists who justify revolution in the name of some idea. As Allman points out, if ethics refers to justification in terms of a principle that is held to stand outside the concrete situations in which people act, then the phrase Marxian ethics is clearly a misnomer. The movement towards revolution is not justified by ethics or by anything else. It is simply that which working people must do, that which they are driven to do by the force of class contradiction. Moreover, every indication suggests that the moral life of a classless society is not, for Marx, something that can be predicted in advance from our knowledge of the morality of class societies. The closest that Marx comes to describing a world after the proletarian revolution is his critique of the Gotha program, and even this description is mostly limited to the practices that would exist immediately after a revolution, as it emerges from capitalist society, which is thus in every respect, economically, morally, and intellectually, still stamped with the birthmarks of the old society. Only some time after the abolition of capitalism, after the enslaving subordination of individuals under division of labor, and therewith also the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished, after labor has ceased to be a means of life and has become itself the primary necessity of life, after the productive forces have also increased with the all-round development of the individual, and all the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be fully left behind, and society inscribed on its banners, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. End of quote. The paucity of Marx's description of what communist society will look like is consistent with his insistence that mental life grows out of material social relations. Right can never be higher than the economic structure of society, and its cultural development thereby determined. Marx expects that the intellectual and moral forms of classless society will be developed by persons who stand in a radically different relationship to each other than we do. To speculate on the choices they will make is fruitless and misleading. One important problem for a Marxian sociology of morality is the propensity of working class actors to believe themselves bound by ties of moral solidarity that cross class lines, to believe in precisely that society-wide solidarity that Durkheim believed essential to social life. Why bourgeois should take themselves for universal human subjects and propagate a universalizing morality which naturalizes their social standpoint is no great mystery. Why the workers should take that morality for their own is a serious puzzle. The inquiries of Western Marxists into hegemony and ideology, inaugurated by Gramsci and Lukács, can be read as an indirect sociology of morality.